Comrade, I need you to listen carefully. This isn't just another headline or routine news briefing. The story breaking across Western networks right now has the kind of power that can sway public opinion, shift alliances, and even affect the battlefield without a single bullet being fired. They are claiming, loudly and repeatedly, that so-called leaked documents from our leadership prove an intention to wipe Ukraine completely off the map. That's the exact phrase they are using, no nuance, no caution, just a blunt accusation designed to send shockwaves through every capital from Washington to Warsaw. Now, I've seen this tactic before. Back in my early years, when I studied the Western playbook, I learned something crucial. They don't just fight with tanks and planes, they fight with perception. In 2003, they talked about Iraq's weapons of mass destruction. In 2011, they painted Libya as minutes away from a genocide. These claims were wrapped in urgency and moral outrage, presented as if the future of humanity depended on immediate action. And every time, these stories were built on selective leaks, anonymous sources, and timing that perfectly matched Western strategic needs. That's exactly what's happening here. The documents, if they exist at all, come from unnamed intelligence officers in NATO states. They've been filtered through sympathetic journalists, cut into pieces, and presented without full context. In the fragments that have been made public, the words are bureaucratic, neutralize hostile structures, integrate administrative systems, secure territorial stability. But in the mouths of Western commentators, those become erasure, annihilation, and destruction. It's like taking a blueprint for repairing a house and telling the neighbors you're planning to burn it down. The timing is no coincidence either. Just days from now, NATO ministers will meet to discuss the next round of military funding for Kyiv. Public support for sending billions more in weapons is weakening in Europe and America. People are questioning the cost, the risk, and the endless nature of this war. But if you drop a headline suggesting Russia plans to erase an entire nation, you reignite fear, moral outrage, and the rallying instinct in Western voters. It's psychological artillery, time to hit before the political vote. From a strategic standpoint, we need to see what they're doing. They are shaping the battlefield of the mind before they reinforce the battlefield on the ground. The Western information machine is like a sniper. It doesn't fire constantly, but when it pulls the trigger, it's aimed with precision, waiting for the perfect moment when the target is most exposed. Let me explain how this looks from our side of the chessboard. Since 2022, our stated objective has been consistent: prevent NATO from turning Ukraine into a forward operating base against Russia. This is about security, about ensuring that the events of the last decade, the slow creep of NATO infrastructure towards our borders, do not continue unchecked. We have said repeatedly in diplomatic language and in public statements that our problem is with military, political structures, not with the Ukrainian people as a whole. But when these so-called leaks are presented to the West, that nuance is stripped away. It's like quoting half a sentence from a treaty and pretending the rest doesn't exist. Think of it like a surgeon being accused of murder because someone only filmed the cutting and not the life, saving Park. The West is showing the cut without the heal. They present integration plans which, in our view, mean security and stability measures to ensure Ukraine can't be militarized against us again as evidence of cultural erasure. It's the same document, but seen through completely different lenses. You, as a civilian politician, must understand the scale of the information front. This isn't just media gossip. In modern conflict, stories like this have strategic weight equal to troop movements. A well-timed leak can delay peace talks, harden public opinion, or force a government into a decision it might otherwise avoid. That's the real weapon here, the ability to shape the decisions of leaders without a single missile launch. Now, let's talk about why this narrative is particularly dangerous. It frames us not as a nation defending our security, but as an existential threat to an entire people. That changes how the West justifies its actions. If they can convince their public that Russia's aim is total erasure, then every measure becomes necessary: long-range missiles, more sanctions, even boots on the ground. Once you're painted as the villain in an existential story, there's no room left for compromise in the eyes of your opponent. They lock themselves into a total victory mindset. Historically, this is a pattern. After World War II, borders in Eastern Europe shifted dramatically. Millions moved, entire maps were redrawn, but those changes were presented as part of building lasting peace. When NATO bombed Yugoslavia in 1999 and carved out Kosovo, it was called liberation. But when Crimea joined Russia in 2014 after a public referendum, it was called annexation. The same type of event, territory changing hands, is judged entirely on who benefits. That's why this "wipe off the map" phrase is so potent. It turns any post-war settlement in our favor into proof of their narrative. From a military advisory standpoint, here's my assessment. This leak, whether real, half real, or entirely invented, is intended to achieve three things. First, to keep the war politically alive in Western capitals by making withdrawal look immoral. Second, to prepare Western publics for the possibility of greater direct involvement. Third, to fracture any diplomatic efforts that might be quietly happening behind the scenes. But here's where I need you to focus, comrade. The public back home will hear this headline too. Our citizens will see it shared online, maybe even repeated by less careful voices in international media. That's why our messaging must be clear, consistent, and rooted in facts. We cannot react with outrage alone. We must counter with the full picture. Remind our people and the world of the stated objectives: demilitarization, neutrality, protection of Russian-speaking communities. We must turn the accusation into a question: who benefits from you believing this? Because the truth is, the map that really matters is not made of lines on paper, but of the security arrangements, cultural ties, and economic systems that endure after the guns fall silent. The West knows that. That's why they focus so hard on controlling the story before that future is decided. Now let's walk through a what-if scenario, because you need to grasp the stakes. Imagine that this leak is accepted worldwide as truth, that every news outlet, every think tank, every politician in the West repeats it without question. Within weeks, public support for Ukraine aid spikes again in Europe. NATO accelerates the delivery of long-range strike systems. U.S. Congress approves another massive funding package. Ukrainian forces, now armed with weapons they were hesitant to send before, launch a coordinated offensive aimed at forcing our troops back, not just from contested areas, but even from territories already under our administration. At the same time, diplomatic channels close. Neutral states that were willing to mediate begin to pull away, fearing association with a side accused of erasure. Trade partners hesitate. Financial pressure builds. The war drags into another year, maybe two. Western leaders frame every setback we face as proof that more pressure will eventually cause Russia to collapse from within. And because the narrative is locked in, even if the original leak is later debunked, the damage is already done. The perception has been set in stone. That is the battlefield we're on right now. Not just the one with trenches and artillery, but the one with microphones, cameras, and digital feeds. In this fight, a story can be more dangerous than a missile because it strikes the mind directly, without warning. And that, comrade, is why you must treat this headline not as a passing news item, but as an active, ongoing operation against us. It is not just ink on paper, it is ammunition in the war for perception. And if we underestimate that, we risk losing ground without a single shot being fired.